Here's the real reason why I think China is surpassing the United States.
新年快乐!
You have a higher income than Chinese, but you can afford fewer groceries than Chinese.
Hello amazing viewer, this is Comfort for Life. I bring to you a compilation of TikTok videos together with famous channel show videos for educational purposes. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and to my returning viewers, I love and appreciate you for your immense love, continued support. I love you. Your love for this channel is on another level. I love you and I don't take it for granted. Let's dive into today's video.
Here's the real reason why I think China is surpassing the United States. And you might be asking, what do I know about any of this? Well, for the past 2 years, I've been living in China as an American, and also next year I'm going to be getting my master's from the best university in the entire world for political economy. Also, my bachelor's was in political science with a concentration on China. I'm going to preface this by saying a lot of this is based on personal experience and academic experience. It's just me theorizing, and I'm open to having conversations in the comments because that's what the comment section is for. Now, a lot of people might disagree with what I'm saying, and I'm not saying that any of this would be feasible to implement in the United States. I really don't think it would be, given our current political climate and how most of our citizens lean politically. Now, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on. You might have found yourself traveling to another country over these past maybe 5 or 10 years, and you've thought to yourself, why do these people in this country, whatever country it may be, seem to have a better quality of life on average than Americans do, even though they have a smaller GDP or smaller GDP per capita than Americans do? In my eyes, these are the 3 biggest political issues that we have in the United States, and I feel like our politicians just don't address these things, and I feel like they're trying to always detract from what really matters. But I think we as Americans need to prioritize these 3 things at the forefront of our political issues, because I think a lot of our political issues stem from these 3 things. Now, I think these 3 main things are drug abuse, gun control, lack of adequate urban planning. Now, let's start with drug abuse. This is one of my biggest issues with the United States. If you've had the opportunity to travel anywhere in East Asia, you might notice that a lot of their cities seem more like utopias than any city in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with having a very productive working class. Now, if you want to know why the Chinese government is so stringent when it comes to drugs and drug abuse, just look at what happened during the opium trade. You can look into that. And then look at the state of Oregon. They decided that they want to decriminalize any and all substances, and it backfired. It backfired, and they're now backtracking on that. Regardless of where you stand politically, I don't really align myself with any major political party in the United States because I feel like neither of them address what's really important right now. Now, I'm more left-leaning, but regardless of where you stand politically, you should realize that this is going to cause a lot of people to become more unproductive. We're going to have a more unproductive labor force and unproductive youth. Then you'll notice a lot of 15-year-olds whose brains are becoming fried because they're using MJ. I'm just going to abbreviate it at that so TikTok doesn't take it down. What does that do for our mental health? Like, notice how all of these political issues trickle down and affect one another. Yes, I know that some people feel that this helps their mental health, but when it comes to children doing this at such a young age, and we all know what happens, there's an issue. There's a big issue with all of this. Portugal is another example of a country that tried to decriminalize any and all substances, and it failed. It backfired, and they're backtracking. Now, the next 2 things I'm going to discuss kind of go hand in hand. Gun control is obviously one of the biggest issues in the United States. If it were up to me specifically, I would ban any and all firearms. Now, I don't think any child should have to fear going to school, or any parent should have to fear sending their children to school. But if you really think about it, this is probably one of the biggest things that's affecting our politics in our country. Many countries in the world are able to successfully maintain democracy without arming their citizens. That's just a fact, and you can argue with me however much you want on it, but you'd be wrong. And if you really think about it, drug control and firearms, they have a lot of things in common. Both of them take away the sense of safety from the average citizen. Both of these things are seen as freedoms, even though they're not really freedoms, and they shouldn't be freedoms because they affect the collective at large. Therefore, neither of those things should be your right. Neither of these things should be your freedom. I think making a chart out of all of this would make this a lot more helpful, but I think gun control has a very significant impact on the fact that our cities are very poorly planned. The urban planning in this country is just awful. We have very few walkable cities. Now, if you really think about it, what's the main reason we can't have good public transportation in this country? It's because we can't afford to. Why can't we afford to, you might ask? Well, because our country gives people too much freedom. People are able to have guns and do whatever drugs they want unregulated, even though, like, yes, of course, there's laws against it, but they're not strictly enforced or as strictly enforced as they should be. That's why we see the NYPD failing to take care of their citizens who are being burned alive on their subways. But our cities quite literally can't afford to have police stationed at every public transportation site in this country. We just can't, we don't have the manpower or the resources to do that. And we're just overall a very inefficient society in the United States. We're very inefficient. Now, what does lack of poor urban planning also translate to? It translates to people not walking enough, people not getting their daily steps in. That's what's happening. And then that in turn turns over to obesity. In other countries, most people walk to get to where they need to be. The other thing is our groceries are pumped with preservatives because we need to spend so much time getting from point A to point B. We need to spend at least I don't know, some people have to travel miles just to drive to the nearest grocery store. What does that mean? That you have to buy groceries that'll last you for 1 week. And that's why our groceries are filled with preservatives and artificial ingredients that have such adverse effects on our health. In most other countries in the world, you step outside of your house or your apartment and there's a grocery store on your block. That's how it should be. That is the best way to maintain efficiency in a society. And we can't have that because it doesn't make sense for the masses of American people to be consolidated into smaller, denser communities. And I'm going to say this for a lot of people who may not have had the privilege to travel. I know that's a large part of the American population, but in other countries, your produce will rot after maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. In the United States, your produce can last you for over a week, which should not be the case. And that's because in most other places in the world, when people step outside of their homes to go grocery shopping, they don't buy a week's worth of groceries. They buy maybe 1 or 2 days worth of groceries, and then they'll go again the next day. And that's how we maintain efficiency. We don't have efficiency in this country, and that's the problem. That's why the majority of people feel unsafe, majority of people feel depressed. And not to alarm anyone with what I'm about to say next, but when I first came back from China to the US after being gone for 2 years, I couldn't even put the food in my mouth. You guys have no idea how sick I felt for the first week that I was back. And to this day, I've been here for 6 months. My hair has still been falling out ever since I came back. My hair never fell out in China. My hair was never falling out. I still cannot eat the sweets here. They're way too sweet. I have been avoiding sweets for so long, ever since I came back, and I can't eat fast food anymore. I can't go out to eat anymore. The food here is just way too salty for me. Can barely even put it in my mouth. And we're just being poisoned. We're genuinely being poisoned in this country, and no one talks about it. No one wants to act like it's a political issue, but it is. It is because it's our health, and our health is very important to us. In most other countries, your friends are maybe 3 subway stops away from each other. Imagine how fun life would be if you could just step on a subway and feel safe and just see your friends whenever you wanted to, or see your family. That's how life should be. That's how life should be in the richest country in the world. And the idea of consolidating people into smaller, denser areas would also probably fix a lot of our environmental issues and concerns. If you know anything about urban planning, you'll know that East Asian countries have some of the best urban planning in the entire world. And if our country was less car reliant, people would be living healthier and happier lives.
2025 is the year that China defeated the United States ideologically. But to understand that, you have to understand what we've been told our entire lives about America. We've been told that America is the greatest country in the world because it has the greatest economic system that the world has ever known, capitalism. We're told that capitalism and competition breeds innovation, that only the best companies and only the best ideas survive. And now what we're seeing on the international stage, that is not the case. You see, the thing that we never talk about is what happens when millionaires and billionaires lose in that competition. What happens when they lose in that marketplace? What happens when Native Americans don't want to sell their land? What happens when black families have prime real estate in New York and Los Angeles and don't want to sell their property? See, that's when the rich run to the United States government to use their violence to take it anyway. What happens when workers get together and say that they collectively want to be paid more money? They run to the government to put down the strikes. You see, underneath the mask of capitalism is just a guy with a gun. We're seeing it in real time right now. American companies could not compete. They could not innovate. So they do what the rich have always done, and that's run to the United States government. And it's not even just TikTok. It's Chinese phones. It's Chinese cars. The wealthy American elite get a sandbox where they're allowed to play without
The clip I'm about to display is going to shed the light on the few comments that I've been getting through the comment section. There are people who are speaking of Americans having like the solution to all the problems they're facing, things that are making them cry on the internet, that they can't afford life, will be for them to make more money. Do you really think that Americans need more money, or do they just need to use the funds that are allocated for them, this scarcity of resources that is in their country, because it's in the hands of some elites? So that's the biggest problem that you're trying to challenge here. If you're watching these videos and you have not unlearned what you have learned, what you have been enculturated, what you have been taught that you are the greatest country in the world, you're going to get hurt and unsubscribe. And I don't mind. I'm here. We're here for positive change. We're here for positive change, and
You have a higher income than Chinese, but you can afford fewer groceries than Chinese. Let me show you something. We assume the currency exchange rate between US dollar and RMB is 127, which means 1 US dollar equals 7 RMB. But in fact, you can only buy 3 eggs with $1 in the United States, but Chinese people can buy 10 eggs with 7 RMB, which is $1 in China. That means RMB has a much bigger purchase power than US dollar. That is something that the currency exchange rate and GDP cannot explain. It is called purchase power parity. It takes into account both the currency exchange rate and the price of many goods. It is usually used as a more reasonable measure of GDP. I'm not an expert in this field, for sure. I'm just trying to tell you the truth of so-called prosperous economy that someone portrayed to you.
I'm seeing all these videos about how China is way better than people thought it was. I just came back from China a week ago, and here are a few things that absolutely blew my mind. First thing is the infrastructure. The cities there are 30 years ahead. The electric cars everywhere. The roads are in perfect condition without a single pothole. There isn't a single litter in the street. Everything is clean. They also use AI to prevent traffic and guide lights accordingly to keep the traffic moving. I mean, just look at this. The architecture is straight out of cyberpunk, and the cities light up at night. The second thing is the futuristic vending machines that they have everywhere. You can get absolutely anything, and the crazy part, if you forget your phone or you forget your wallet, it's okay because you can pay with your face. And their version of an Uber X is a 2025 electric car. When you get into it, there's amenities. You have water bottles, you have gum, and it's like $5 to get from one side of the city all the way to the other. And they have bullet trains that go 200 kilometers per hour. For example, when I was there, I went from Shenzhen to Hong Kong, which would be like an hour drive. It took me 10 minutes with the train. And the robots everywhere. I'm telling you, you're in the future. Robots are cleaning the streets, robots are delivering food or packages, and it's fast because they use drones.
You know the difference between the way China does it versus the way American does it?
No.
The difference between like TikTok in America is like dances and people doing pranks and people doing things to try to get viral views. In China, it highlights scientific achievements, athletic achievements. It highlights like people doing things, accomplishing things, where they're trying to elevate the quality of the lives of the kids that are addicted to this TikTok. So instead of them being addicted to like putting piss in the hand soap container, instead of doing something like that, like what they're doing is like showing science experiments. They're showing innovation. They're showing kids accomplishing great athletic goals, and it's motivating people to do good things and improve themselves.
China already produce more AI papers compared to the US, and I think soon enough China is going to surpass US in AI by a large margin, just because there are more data in China, and it's also easier for China to mine data because everything is digitalized compared to the US. and there's just more talent in AI as well.
And so I want to just illustrate something for you guys very quickly. This is Deepseek on the side here, and this is ChatGPT. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a few prompts so you can just get a comparative idea of how these two models perform differently next to each other. And this is really important because right now we are like in the Manhattan Project 2.0, and the Manhattan Project was about, how do we build, nuclear bombs, right? But this is really it. This lets you know the magnitude and scale of what we're dealing with in artificial intelligence. And right now, China just released DeepSeek, and they have their R1 and V3 models. The R1 is probably something that's comparative to ChatGPT's O1 advanced reasoning model, but we'll get into that because I've been using DeepSeek. And if the American government was afraid about TikTok and being able to get all of the information and behavior and deepest, darkest thoughts of Americans, then DeepSeek is like just injecting it right into our veins. Like, here's my social, right? Here's everything about me that you can have. And so I want to be able to illustrate just some prompts. We're going to go through this. I'll probably break this up in sections where we're going to go just basic context handling, some immediate context handling. We're going to do creative context handling, multi-step logic and execution, some advanced reasoning and critical thinking, and then we'll do some advanced contextual challenges. And so I want to kick this off just so you can see what this looks like, because DeepSeek is about 30 times less expensive than ChatGPT, right? And so all of this uses tokens. When you write something, so if you think about what tokens look like, if you were to write a novel, I created a token calculator in Claude. So if you create a novel to a book, it's like 2,500 words. A research paper is 1,500 words. And so we just kind of maxed this all the way out just to see. You can see how crazy it gets in terms of cost per thousand, right? Cost per 1,000 tokens, $22. Cost per 1,000 tokens, $483, just in terms of scale. And so, all right. And so that's just some context in terms of why the American government is investing $500 billion in AI infrastructure, is because they don't want to lose to China in this AI wars race. But anyway, we're going to get to just some basic, simple prompting, right? And we're going to say, what is photosynthesis in terms? So I'm going to put these in here and you'll get a good idea of like how fast the models are even moving, right? And so you can see the answers, the speed in which an answer and how thorough each one actually gives an answer. And then we're going to do explain. And so this is our first just basic context handling. And then we're going to review what they say. And then summarize in sentences. And so we're going to see here, ChatGPT is still talking, DeepSeek is still thinking, and then there we go. All right, and so that's all of them. And so we want to see what ChatGPT did. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants, in simple terms, and we're going to come back up here also to DeepSeek just to see. In simple terms, plants, photosynthesis is a process which green plants, large algae, and some bacteria use sunlight to make their own food. They use sunlight. And so you can just see the structure in which it gave an answer. It's how plants eat. In simple terms, sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, chemical reaction, glucose, oxygen. So it's interesting in terms of how we lay this out. So how does photosynthesis contribute to the oxygen cycle? And so what happens here when you think about context is that we ask for in simple terms. And so oftentimes the large language model will remember the context in terms of how it's interfacing or discussing with you. And so oxygen production, atmospheric oxygen, respiratory. I mean, it's definitely a more verbose answer within DeepSeek versus ChatGPT. And so here we go on the third question. Explain how the oxygen cycle impacts human life and ecosystem. And so the oxygen cycle is essentially for human life and ecosystem because it maintains the balance of oxygen. It considers a continuous supply of oxygen, which is essential for survival. Impacts on human respiration, health and well-being, health, medical applications, impacts on the ecosystem, animal life, aquatic ecosystem, plant life, decomposition, climate regulation, and then it offers a summary. And then I like to look at, just when we get in some of these more, the summary, like how robotic does it sound? Photosynthesis drives the oxygen cycle by covering sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into oxygen and glucose. Photosynthesis produces oxygen as a byproduct, which is released into the atmosphere. And so this is really interesting in terms of how they lay it out. And so this is our first test. And I just want you guys to just see that and provide some feedback on what you think about this, because the next one I'm going to do is going to be on research synthesis.
China contributed more to the world economic growth than the G7 countries combined. From 2013 to 2021, China contributed 38.6%. And the G7 countries, all of them combined, Canada, France, the UK, Germany, Japan, and the US, contributed 25.7%. Can you believe that? That is crazy. I mean, I believe it. I've witnessed it. I've seen it with my own eyes. Here in China, for the past 11 years that I've been here, the rapid development, the change has just been immense. The speed at which things can change in China is just unprecedented.
The United States spends almost $1 trillion every year on war making. But do you know what the budget of the United Nations is? United Nations is supposed to be an institution, a global institution to build peace. The United Nations annual budget, my friends, is $3 billion. $3 billion to build peace, $1 trillion just by the United States to produce war.
This right here is a Chinese toilet. So do you want to check it out? We can see what a Chinese toilet looks like.
Wow. See, it even has English here. Reuse classifications. It's teaching you about recycling. Wash your hands. Get your temperature checked. Then we have a blow dryer. We have a sink. Motion powered. Got a beautiful tree here. Very nice. Very nice. We got a lower one for the kids. Shanghai. But they're motion operated. Green, green, green. Those are all open. We have one for like a normal Western, and then 2 squat toilets.
Now that's a bathroom. That's crazy. You know, I wasn't expecting the bathroom to be that good. Where's the spaceship terminal? I have to be fair, okay? I have to be fair. Most public toilets are not like that. The most public toilets are not like that. That one's a very, very nice public toilet. So I don't want to be the opposite side and say that every toilet in China is like that, and so therefore you have to judge Chinese society by the quality of those toilets. Because in that case, where's the spaceship terminal?
The reason why we are providing you with visual aids after pointing out what is going wrong in your country is for you to see how developed your country can be, how the development can be lived. Yeah. Yeah, that's the only point. That's the point. We're not here to compare countries. We're not here to compare governments, because different countries have different histories. But can you see how the country that has gone and has learned from the past mistakes of the US is doing better? Because this is a country that sat down and analyzed other countries around them and looked at other countries and decided to not repeat the mistakes they have made. So, and this is what you can see about them. So what's wrong with us sharing this? So if you love this content, kindly subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell for more related videos to this. I know you'll love it here, and I love and appreciate you. Goodbye for now. Instead of being upset or just crying for seeing the development in the other country, it's important for you now to see and start thinking critically. Why is that our government was picturing and keep painting other countries as undeveloped? We are the best, so that we can only see that the world revolves around us. Can't you see that as a manipulation kind of thinking? Can't you see, I want us to reason right here. American, watching this, is this offensive to you? And if it is, then there's a problem somewhere. There are things you have to unlearn. Yeah, these things and I always say, I believe in the US. I believe